What's going on, everybody? My name is Spencer Ostrowski, and this is the Delivering Sports Show. I am joined by my co-host.
I am Kevin.
Nice. First time we did this.
Not Durant.
To show the record, when I asked him that last time, he started going into the commentary instead of saying his name. We weren't recording at the time, but I just had to make sure everyone knew that. So
I'm going to go ahead and dispute that because there's no official record that says otherwise.
My lawyers tell me not to comment. So today we're doing a commentary on the finals as a whole. So we just finished watching Game 4. Of course, the Raptors went up 3-1. So we're just going to kind of give our thoughts on what we've seen so far in the entire series. A lot about tonight's game, but we'll start with the beginning of the series in Game 1. What was the big story to you in Game 1?
In Game 1, that was like a million years ago.
The two storylines I got from that is that Drake was a really big deal to everyone in the sports.
Oh, like coming out of Game 1?
Yeah, exactly.
The Raptors won Game 1, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it was that, this is actually going to be a series. It's not going to be, like, a normal wash of a series that we a lot of people expected. Some people were, being, purveyors of the idea that the Warriors could win based on the Raptors, actually, mind you, could win on, based off, the matchup advantages that they had. But this kind of cemented it, this might be a serious possibility for them if they can, one, if the chips fall their way and Durant doesn't doesn't get back in time, or if he doesn't play at all, and two, if they can just capitalize on what they were able to capitalize on in the first game.
I'll say two things about Game 1 that really stick out to me. The Raptors came out with a lot of energy because they're at home, which leads into my next point. Do you rethink the importance of the regular season? Because if Game 1 isn't Oracle, do you think that the Raptors win that game as well?
Well, hindsight's 20/20, considering they just won 2 straight games at Oracle. But maybe they have that, they had the spark, they had that energy coming in. This is the first ever finals game in Toronto. It's they're kicking off the series there. The energy is incredibly palpable. It's the whole city has never experienced anything like this before. So I think it lends credence to that, the assist that the energy surrounding the arena and the home game being in Toronto. I think that lends. It's not tangible. It's not quantifiable. You can't really measure it, but I think you can comfortably assume that that helped them. That helped the Raptors in particular.
I really don't think that they do win Game 1 because a team that only one player has finals experience, or I guess Serge Ibaka did too, but in reality,
I have a few players with finals experience on the team.
In the starting lineup,
Kawhi, Danny Green.
Right. I mean, to an extent, yeah, but I'm talking about their biggest players, Kyle Lowry, Siakam had never been to a finals,
That's true.
Van Fleet had never been to the finals either, so what I'm trying to get at here is saying that, home court advantage was a major thing going into this because now that Toronto had won a game, they knew that they had a chance to win this series, so going into Oracle was a lot less scary than it would be going into a Game 1.
I agree. There's law of diminishing returns in that, home court becomes less and less advantageous the shittier you play, and that's we're kind of seeing that with the Warriors right now because home court meant absolutely their home court meant absolutely nothing because they just dropped both of their games, and they probably they may not ever get another home game for the rest of this series.
Right. So that was Game 1. It was a really big deal. We'll talk a little bit about something else that's worth talking about at least. Drake is in his antics going in Game 1 where he rubbed Nick Nurse's shoulders. What do you think about that? Was I taking it too far?
That was in the finals, the Eastern Conference Finals, wasn't it?
No, it was this finals. It was Game 1.
I'm not sure that.
I promise he was Game 1 because there's a lot of shit on Twitter about it.
I think I'm gonna dispute that. I'm pressing X to doubt.
You're gonna text your lawyers?
I'm officially doubting that right now.
All right.
Keep talking. I'm gonna look.
Well, I'll talk about it in general, even if it wasn't for the finals. I guess if I'm wrong, then
just the antics in general.
Yeah, you could say that too. Personally, I don't really care. People in the front row of games have a lot of shit. We all remember first of all, it was never taken as far as this guy who was saying these racial slurs to Russell Westbrook at the Jazz game.
Shit. Sorry.
You okay?
I just bumped the mic. I'm sorry.
Yeah, nice. So yeah, I think maybe rubbing his shoulders was a bit of a big deal on some level.
It was Game 6 of the Eastern Conference Finals.
Interesting. In any case, he's still been obviously very animated, and then there's the big scuffle with Draymond as well, either in Game 1 or Game 2.
Yeah, they were barking at each other after Game 1.
It just gets more highlighted because he's a very famous person. People shit talk people, and people in the front stand and like the front court or like court side, they yell at players. Like, it's a very regular thing. And he hasn't gone up to Nick Nurse and like touched his shoulders again. So
there's a fine line. I do think that there's a fine line. Like, obviously you can't like do which we'll get into later, what the minority owner of the Warriors ended up doing, and like don't put your hands on players. Don't get like keep it on the game. Keep it about the game. Call him, like, say his jump shot's broken or some shit like that. Don't talk about his family. Don't talk about like his personal life. Don't talk about any of that kind of stuff. That's the line. You know, I think that should be easy enough not to cross. I think Drake understands that. I think he's just like trolling. Like, I don't see the harm in it. A lot of people are like freaking the fuck out about it, right. Especially Milwaukee fans were losing their shit about Drake. And like, you see like Warriors, like I saw Warriors fans like getting, as the kids say, big mad about it as well, because like I saw like one person that called him like a talentless hack, and that he was just doing this to like to kind of save his fledgling music career. I'm like, that's a bit excessive.
That's not. First of all, it's not true. People just
man's dominated a Billboard for like 8 straight years.
Freak out, man, like over everything. He was. I don't know. I'm sure he didn't pay for his tickets, but he brings attention to the game no matter what. So he's good for the NBA product.
He's technically an employee of the Raptors. He's their global ambassador.
Oh, really?
So I think he's contracted with the Raptors. Yeah.
It's good for the game. It's fun. It was another thing to be interested into the finals.
I don't have an issue with it at all.
So what is the over under 0.5 Drake touching Nick Nurse in Game 6 of the NBA Finals?
I don't think I'll go under, because I just think that like it kind of
no shoulder taps or nothing.
Well, if they win, I don't know. Like during the game, I don't think so.
You got to go into
because that was during that was after like a big and one or something like that.
You're going into the casino tomorrow, and you have no idea who's gonna win or lose. So you got to place $100 on yes or no.
Okay, I think we have to set some parameters here.
No, in the casino there are no parameters. The bet is the amount of times Drake touches Nick Nurse in Game 5.
At any point, at any point between the starting and final buzzer.
After tip off to the final buzzer.
Yeah, I don't think he does that. I think at some point he does touch Nick Nurse, but it's after the final buzzer.
I'm going over. He will touch Nick Nurse from tip off before the final buzzer.
We'll see.
Okay,
we shall see.
So we'll transition into Game 2. I think he touched him in Game 1. I think because they won the game. So in Game 2, obviously the Warriors look a little bit more like the Warriors again, and they have a big game. What was the difference in Game 2 to you?
I think they kind of just adjusted their sets, and they realized they had to play better defense, and they did. And overall with Game 2, I didn't get to watch all of Game 2, but like they kind of just relaxed a little bit. It felt really tense. It was obviously like it must have been a strange feeling for them the first time. You know, they're very much used to playing Game 1 of the NBA Finals on their home court. And to do that for the first time and play this ultra important series where, you know, their dynasty, people like their dynasty is legitimately at stake here, and when you're not playing on your home court and you don't have that sense of familiarity, and it's replaced with not extreme hostility because it's Canada, but they're not known for being incredibly aggressive or aggravated, but I think that kind of rattled them a little bit, and then, you know, Game 2 was about settling in and realizing like, oh, we just got to stick to our sets, stick to our game plans, and we had like a trademark like Warriors third quarter avalanche. So I think that that Game 2 kind of symbolized like a return, like a reaffirmation with familiarity for them.
Yeah, I think the big story for Game 2 is that the adrenaline wore off. A lot of Game 1 was a lot of adrenaline, and now a lot
of pumped up feelings.
Yeah, once you start Game 2 onwards, it's really just regular basketball. It's heightened because you're in the finals, obviously, but at the end of the day, it's your game plan against their game plan. You know, that's kind of like the beginning of the NFL season. Everything is like super exciting and new, so you have a lot of weird things going on the first few weeks. But once you start selling the season, like, you know, trends are pretty predictable in some sense, and you kind of really like you got to stick to what you've been practicing.
And I think there's something to be said for the fact that like the Warriors have been playing the same guys in the finals for in a sense they've been playing the same guys for the last like 4 years essentially. They've been playing LeBron and some assortment of the Cleveland Cavaliers. I think to a degree you get kind of used to that. You get kind of familiar with, you know, like they've played the Cavs more times in the past couple years than almost any team, I think.
Game 2 was a big been there done that, I think, for the Warriors. Like you knew they weren't going to panic. Like I really like never thought in a million years that they were going to lose game 2, just because they have been to so many like straight finals. Like they understand what it takes to win, obviously. So I knew the adjustments would come. And I guess another big storyline was the Raptors' resilience in Game 2, being down. They survived essentially a third quarter avalanche to get the game close. I mean, the game only came down to a dagger by Andre Iguodala, so it was big on them. Heartbreaking, you know, and it's always interesting to see how a team will bounce back after having really heartbreaking kind of loss in the game.
Very well.
Yeah,
I'll say that very well.
Exactly, right. Another big thing that happened in Game 2 was Klay Thompson's injury, which is Kevin Durant's injury is the biggest story, but during the finals itself, because Kevin Durant was injured,
kind of had to evaluate like based on what they had, who you had going in and stuff like that.
So Klay Thompson's injury was huge. I didn't think he was going to play Game 3. Hamstring injuries are very tricky. It's very different than like a calf strain or something like that. Like hamstring injuries, like you depend on squatting, like shooting. Like, it's very dependent. So I didn't think he was going to play Game 3, and I'm like,
especially a guy like him who's such an aggressive defender.
Right. So when Klay Thompson, you pretty much know he's not going to play Game 3. That changes the entire series. You have to reevaluate everything you had previously thought was going to happen in Oracle.
And one of the biggest things that I noticed in Game 2 that the Raptors kind of like was their deficiency was that, you know, the Warriors were basically throwing anyone on the court and daring the Raptors to take advantage of it and score on them, and they just weren't. Like Quinn Cook was on the floor and Andrew Bogut was on the floor, and none of that was being like taken advantage of, and it kind of just like, you know, they were leaving those guys out there and getting their main guys rest, their starters rest, and just because the Raptors weren't able to capitalize in the times where they had like basically their starters on the floor, and then, you know, the Warriors had a very depleted bench out. And I think what signaled that, like, you know, when you hear that Klay Thompson's not going to play the next game, I think like the light bulb goes off for them, and they realize like, okay, this is what we have to do. They're going to be like, we didn't take advantage of it the first time. It's being like shoved in front of our face this time, and for us to not take advantage of it would be to essentially give this series away, because I do think if the Warriors win that game without Klay, I think they do go on to win this series.
And weirdly enough, I will say this: Quinn Cook and Bogut were very good in Game 2. It's very strange. Like I'll have to try to explain this. They focus so much on Steph Curry and Klay Thompson in a weird way that allowed their role players to be effective. Like, what I mean is this: Andrew Bogut was catching lobs. Mm-hmm. Quinn Cook was catching the ball, catch and shoot on the 3-point line, which is a very different image than what we saw today. We'll talk a little about today, because I think this is a good transition. Today, Quinn Cook was getting run off the 3-point line, which is a very big deal, and he was doing pull-up jumpers at the elbow. Andrew Bogut was taking weird, silly passes from the top of the key. They're essentially allowing,
he was wilding today, man,
allowing Quinn Cook and Andrew Bogut to play out of their game. The Warriors' game plan was a huge difference from Game 2 to Game 4.
Especially because if you're the Warriors and you see that like these guys are capable of contributing in that way like they did in Game 2, you might be willing to give them a little more leeway, just because they are spread so thin right now, and it's they need it wherever they can get it, and it may be an over reliance on them, may have caused them to go like the other way for them, and may have been their downfall. Overall, I think there was a lot of things that contributed to the Warriors losing tonight, but that may have been one of them.
That was a big one to me. So we'll go into Game 3 now. I don't want to skip too much around. I just wanted to make that point about tonight in Game 2. So Game 3, no Klay Thompson. It's a must-win for the Raptors, of course. If they lose that game, they lose the series. Obviously, you're not going to go down 2-1 losing home court advantage and have Klay going onwards. It's just not going to happen. Mm-hmm. Not with this Warrior team, not with the players they have on there. So this was a game that the Raptors went into. Going into Oracle, you would think it'd be really tough. And again, the Warriors look very complacent. They look like they're like, all right, we're at home. Let's wrap it up.
I wouldn't even say that it was complacent. They were just like, this is all we got. Like, this is there. It was the R. Kelly video, man. I'm fighting for my fucking life. Like,
yeah, exactly.
No, because like it was Steph and Boogie, and like you can't really rely on Boogie at this point just because he just came back from injury.
He's not. He's just raw dogging it.
Exactly. And like Steph is just like, if it's just Steph out there, like it's very easy to just that gravity becomes different because there's no one else he can pass to essentially that he can rely on to make a shot.
He has a 50-point game, and the rest of the team just looked out of it. Like they didn't have a game plan really, and it's really tough because it's hard to calculate that you're going to lose Kevin Durant and Klay Thompson, but again, you feel like it's like they weren't in the game for the entire time. They were playing behind. Like there were a few exciting moments,
basically
but
from the
Raptors had control of that game. You would think it's on Steve Kerr to get these guys together to make a better game plan, and they looked uncomfortable and they looked complacent, really, to me.
I'm not sure. Like I totally agree with like what you said earlier about like it's a must win for the Raptors.
You don't agree with me? Are you serious?
This
is a sports show, man.
It's a must win in the sense of like they have to win it, or like the outlook on the series becomes very bleak. But as far as like analyzing the game individually in the context of this single game, I think all they had to do was go in and not fuck it up, essentially, just because the Raptors are smart. Nick Nurse is a very good coach, and I feel like they were poised to take advantage of Klay Thompson not being in the game, and I think that's exactly what they did. That was their main objective.
Yeah.
Just capitalize on Klay's absence, and I think they did exactly that, because I think Danny Green had a really good game in that. I think he had like 18 points, and he was just like nailing threes. Kyle Lowry was nailing threes.
Yeah, Kyle Lowry had his first good offensive night. Kyle Lowry has affected the game in a lot of good ways for the entire series with just his defense, but in Game 3 he was able to step up offensively, which was really the nail in the coffin for that game.
So yeah, I think it was Game 3 was more of just a matter of them just doing their job, essentially.
The biggest debate of Game 3 was this: was Klay Thompson's missing defense or offense more important to the Warriors?
Interesting. I think offense, just because like Steph has to take every single shot, and those shots don't come easy, and they come kind of at a detriment. Like, not at a detriment to the team, because of like if he doesn't score those points, no one's going to score those points. But it's just like someone needs to be able to, like, if he's going to pass to someone and have them shoot, they need to be able to make the basket, and no one he passed to could reliably do that. And I think they could have used that from Klay Thompson.
On some level, I do disagree. Steph Curry did have a 50-point game, which is about what you would want from two players, from Klay and Steph combined offensively.
Sure.
And they looked really like when Klay is their best defender on Kawhi, like
perimeter wise, yeah.
I don't really care. Not you specifically. I don't care what people say about Draymond. Like, Klay is their best option to guard Kawhi pretty much on this team, and he was missing. And Kawhi had a 30-point game. Obviously, he played immeasurably well, and then Danny Green as well. Klay Thompson would have time on Danny Green too with all these switches. So
I get where you're coming from there, but like in the sense of like the Raptors' offense has been so predicated on like getting the defense to switch. Klay's not going to be guarding Kawhi as often as like the Warriors would want him to be guarding him anyway. Not to say that doesn't matter, because there are key points where I'm sure Klay's going to be guarding Kawhi on a possession, and he misses a basket that he makes otherwise. But I do think that like just missing someone else who can score at all, I think is what kind of did the Warriors in. I have a different philosophy. Like I obviously defense overall as a team is important, but my philosophy is just like you got to score more points than the other team, and you got to do whatever it takes that allow you to make that happen,
Right. It's interesting. I think at the end of the day we can both agree that like missing Klay was so big, man. Like this team looks so like just regular.
It just looked depleted, man.
Yeah,
it just like
regular
like
team
like the pieces, like it looked like a team with like that was just missing pieces.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Because like this team is not supposed to function this way. It's supposed to function, a certain like the ball's supposed to move a certain way, and people are supposed to be in certain positions because that plays to their strengths, and they just weren't there, and it shows.
Exactly. So the Warriors go down 2-1 going into Game 4, which is a must-win game for the Warriors.
This
and going down 3-1 after. Plus the Raptors win home court advantage back. Like, you got everything going for the Raptors essentially. So the Warriors have to go into this game thinking we're at home, we got to take care of business, and we'll see what happens for the rest of the series.
And I just think it's so crazy that like this officially brings Durant into question, because I'm just like, okay, they can, they'll take it to the point where I think this is the limit. I thought this was like as someone who would want to see him play in this series, I think the limit I would take it at is right here at this game. You're down 2-1. You're at risk of going down 3-1 and putting yourself in potentially the biggest hole possible against a team that is poised to capitalize on it in every way that you wouldn't want them to, and he doesn't play. And that kind of seals it for me. Like my confidence in the Warriors dwindled as each second ticked by in this game. Just because, like, if Durant's not, if it's not going to be this game for Durant, and they lose, I don't think him coming back, having missed however many games that he's missed, being able to make an impact that is at the level of coming back from a 3-1 deficit.
This game was the big story in this game was Kevin Durant, yes, and I'll talk about that as well, obviously. And the big thing to me is that the Warriors' defensive scheme it didn't work. They came in with a game plan, and I'll tell you, I think they stuck with it till the bitter end. Like, whatever they had play, what they would end up doing is whoever the guard or whoever it was had the ball at the top of the key, they would double team them, and they would easily pass out of this double team to the rolling player, who would either have a wide open dunk. I know Ibaka had the wide open layup. I know Siakam had the wide open dunk, or pass it out to the corner, where Siakam was one time, where Danny Green was a couple times, Kawhi was open a couple times, and when we say he was wide open, there is no more wide open than that. There was the Kawhi one. Iguodala was coming from the paint. He was the closest player. From the paint. Tried to run out to the 3-point line where Kawhi Leonard is in the corner, and
he's not Mitchell Robinson. He's not blocking that shot.
Exactly.
Yeah, like their selection on who to double team in a lot of those situations just. It didn't make sense to me, like watching it. I'm just like, why is that like the one you're gonna double? Obviously, you want to double Kawhi whenever you can, but it's like Kawhi's a better passer than I think anyone will ever give him credit for, and he's gonna find that open man regardless. And pretty much anyone on this team is liable to make a three. So I don't know. I don't understand the scheme of double teaming, and like. With that, I also I talked to you during the game while we were watching it, and I was like, I think they're doing like the exact same thing that Cleveland did in 2016 that allowed them to win. As far as the offensive side of the ball goes, in that anytime Kawhi had the ball, they're just looking to try and get him switched on to Curry, because there's no
this is whoever offense on Curry today.
That's what I'm saying, because Curry he's a better defender than I think anyone. He's grown into a better defender than I think anyone will give him credit for, as far as just on ball and being able to play physically and match up with someone physically. But it's just if there's a physical mismatch, there's nothing he can do. And it's definitely a physical mismatch against Kawhi, because I think he's the strongest person on the court at all times.
There, yeah. No, not
so I think that it's just, Kawhi has the ball, find Curry, and then you get a bucket essentially.
It's crazy. They beat the shit out of Curry in this game.
They were throwing him through the ringer, man. Everything on the offensive, when he was on the defensive side of the ball, it's a hard screen, a pretty hard screen almost every time
to get the switch.
And then and then when he brings it up on the offensive side, it's just they're being super handsy, super physical, and just they're just he can't breathe either. He's getting completely smothered the entire game. It cost them
fouls on the defensive side and put them in the bonus slot. But at the end of the day, it physically frustrated him. You could see him. There was one play where he was screaming because he was so mad.
And it worked in the sense of it got him out of his rhythm too, because he's hesitating to shoot.
Very hesitant.
The greatest the greatest 3-point shooter in the league in the history of the league is hesitating to shoot 3-pointers because of he's not acutely aware of everything that's going on around him, and he doesn't see what's coming. He doesn't know how to react to it if something comes and he's in a compromising position.
Yeah, they would double team him, force the ball into Iguodala's hand, and he hit the big shot in game 2, but this man he sucks, dude. He's not terrible. He's not.
I'll give up. I'm not. Yeah. Maybe you don't want to give up that wide open shot to end the game. But in 9 times out of 10, I'm giving Andre Iguodala that shot, and that was the one time that he made it.
He made it and it won them a game. Congratulations. But Nick Nurse probably went back to the game tape, was this guy's not.
They became because they look at the game tape and we were half an inch away from stealing that ball anyway. So
you gotta.
You want to say that you live with it. You don't want to say that you live with it because it lost you a finals in a game in the NBA Finals. But in any other context, in a vacuum, if Andre Iguodala gets kicked out to a wide open 3, I'm not sending like Siakam out there to close out on him when I know that I might need that rebound.
Right, and the thing is, like, Nick Nurse has to sit down and say, okay, who would I want taking a shot in a vacuum, no matter where it's at, against who? Do I want Steph Curry taking a shot, or do I want Andre Iguodala? Do I want Andrew Bogut? Do I want Quinn Cook taking a shot? And he said, I'll let those three guys shoot, and I'll cover Curry, and I'll put him through screens, and I'll play him. I'll go after him defensively every single play. If it's not him on the ball, they'll shoot him through screens. And it worked perfectly. I mean, Steph Curry still had a pretty good game, but you're never gonna stop Steph Curry in any game ever. But they frustrated him enough to where it truly affected the game, and it won them the game. That was the biggest story of the game to me, was how much they focused.
They just put him through the ringer, man.
Every single minute on the floor was about Steph Curry in one way or another. Either double teaming him defensively and being physical, or putting him through screens, or having him switched onto better players.
Just making him defend.
Yeah.
Just pretty much anyone.
Yeah, I mean, it makes your legs tired, it makes you frustrated, and you felt it.
And especially just in that game, like, they need him, especially just because Klay can't get free either. Like,
and
I think
Klay
that
was not getting free and still hitting.
That's what I'm saying. But like they did a really good job of like tracking him, following him, and making sure making sure he couldn't break away and get that fully squared up shot.
Yeah.
Because that's gonna go in every single time.
Yeah.
And it forces him off of his rhythm too, where he has to take off balance shots. Exactly. And so when that's going on, Klay can't get free. You can't get him the shots that you want him to get, and you don't want him taking the shots that he ended up taking. It's harder because, you know, Steph you can't take him out of the game. Essentially, you're going to lose if you take him out, and that forces him to play more minutes. He's tired, and the physical like onslaught from the Raptors isn't letting up. Like, as the longer he's out there, the more the more aggressive they're going to go at him, and that's exactly what they did.
Yeah, I mean, it was a shocking game, I would say, at the end of the day.
I mean, so now it's like, you know, the Golden State Warriors, on the verge of a three-peat, they now find themselves down 3-1 heading back to Toronto.
Did you ever
no Kevin Durant in sight. Where do they go from here?
I don't know. They have to figure out their plan defensively, first of all. Like, their scheme, it just doesn't work.
I'll say, I don't know, because the energy, if they thought the energy was palpable game one, I think it's gonna be crazy.
Everyone's gonna be on the edge of their seats.
Like, and I can count on the Warriors to make adjustments.
Yeah, of course. I mean, they're not gonna lay down.
No, absolutely not. You imagine that you have Klay. You imagine that, I don't know, like, what you can, like, I don't know what we're gonna like get with DeMarcus Cousins. I don't know what you can rely on him for. If you can get absolutely anything that resembles what, you know, the old DeMarcus Cousins was, I think, like, that's what you, like, I don't know, like, what I'm saying is I don't think old DeMarcus Cousins is walking through that door. I don't think Kevin Durant's going to be walking through that door.
I don't think Kevin Durant will be walking through
like
that
I said,
door.
man, like, if it wasn't last game, like, is he going to be able to come back
in Toronto
in this game 5 in an elimination game, the first elimination game the Warriors have faced in 3 years? Is he going to be able to come back and contribute to the point where it kind of catalyzes and starts to and sparks and fuels an entire comeback through 7 games in this series?
Right, you can't just work someone into an eliminate.
Especially like with the kind of injury that he's been dealing with and how many games that he's missed. It doesn't look good. No. I don't know where the Warriors go from here. They obviously they're going to have to put this all in the back of Curry, and it's just, I don't think the game plans have been doing him a great service lately, just especially these last 2 games, because the first game you have him completely erupt and basically all of his teammates fail him just because he's out there by himself.
Yeah.
And then the next game he has his weapon, like he has his go-to with Klay, right. and they just can't take advantage of it. So I don't know what they're gonna do now. They have to hope like that. They might be like praying for DeMarcus Cousins to walk through that door, and I don't like their chances.
Yeah, but the thing is, Nick Nurse did a really good job in Game 3 of exploiting DeMarcus Cousins, and he was forced to take him out of the game. He was just getting ShamWow.
Yeah, he did not play. He did not play like the rest.
Instead
of the
game. Allowing DeMarcus Cousins to play like physical in the post, which he did a very good job of in Game 2, he was then played in the high pick and roll, and he just couldn't do it.
And he did a really good job of like, to Nick Nurse's credit, he's coached. He's thoroughly outcoached Steve Kerr in this series.
Absolutely.
And it's not the first time that Steve Kerr has been outcoached in a series. And in the past, like, no one's really talked about it because he's been bailed out by his players. But I think he's been third. He was outcoached in 2016 by a rookie coach. He's getting outcoached currently by a rookie head coach.
Game Game,
I don't think
game
it ends
5
up
is on Steve Kerr at the end of the day.
It doesn't. In no way do I think this will result in him getting fired. But it's still like it's indicative. Like Nick Nurse knows that DeMarcus Cousins, if anything, right now can still be a strong rebounder, and he did a fantastic job of getting DeMarcus Cousins out of the paint, out on the 3-point line and contesting shots.
Yeah,
and that. Again, like the Warriors can't rebound. Like it's been one of the bigger issues with them this entire season, especially through the regular season. There were times where they were like, oh, we kind of like miss a guy like JaVale McGee right now.
That and exactly, because Marc Gasol has been running free. He had a bad game too, but outside of game 2, Marc Gasol has like been completely exploiting this team with his passing or the 3-point shots on the line, or even wide open dunks. Like he just knows where to be. Because he's so experienced. He's been to the conference finals, obviously. He's been to the playoffs numerous years. He knows what it takes, and he's showing how to get it done, and proving to be an enormous trade for them.
I think he's indicative of like what a lot of like the unpopular opinion that like the Raptors could win this series going in, because no one actually believed that. Was that like, if they do, it'll be because of these mismatches, and I think he's one of the biggest mismatches as far as the second center off the bench. I believe Marc Gasol, at this point in his career, as smart of a guy he is, and being as acclimated with the system and how much it plays to his strengths, to where it didn't in Memphis as much, just because they weren't playing more of a spaced out game.
And they didn't have Kawhi, like
exactly, yeah.
When you don't have Kawhi, like when you are relying, he's not at a point in his career where you can just rely on him anymore, like what he was in the conference finals. Like he has a guy like Kawhi, he has a guy like Kyle Lowry, he has a guy like Siakam. All these guys are in a team where he is not the main focus, and when he's not the main focus, he's gonna play the best of his abilities, and he really is.
Yeah,
defensively, offensively.
And I say all that to say that like if you have that kind of Marc Gasol, that kind of where he's locked in that way, and you're putting him up against DeMarcus Cousins, where you have absolutely no idea what kind of contribution you're gonna get from him, I think that's indicative of the kind of mismatches you were dealing with, and the kind of mismatches that could win Toronto this series.
Yeah,
and
his
that Nick
ability
Nurse
to shoot threes too is like. You can't even put something. You can't even.
I'm willing to commend Nick Nurse for just extracting the willingness to shoot from Marc Gasol, just because you and I watched so many of Memphis' games where he would just pass up so many threes.
Yeah.
And maybe that's just because the system didn't really promote shooting threes as often from a guy like him. But
yeah, we'll see what the new regime looks. They're still doing a coaching search, but yeah.
But yeah, like it's
that wasn't, the scheme wasn't working.
It just doesn't look good for the Warriors in any which way. Just because if like I said, if Kevin Durant does come back, how well is he going to be able to play? Yeah, I trust Kevin Durant to a degree, because I think he's the best player in the world right now. But like coming off a calf injury, like I don't know how much.
Tough.
Calf injuries are tough. Like especially a guy like him. He's ISO heavy, and he's going to be able to. A lot of it has to do with his leaping. A lot of his game is attached to his leaping ability and his jumping ability, and I'm not sure. It doesn't look good.
Right. So that leads me into the last two things I would like to talk about for this episode. Pretty much. What does Kevin Durant do for the rest of the series, if anything, and where does he go? How does the outcome of this series affect it? Also, how does this series affect where Kawhi and Kevin Durant are going at the end of these seasons?
Well, you and I have both talked about it. Like, it's fucking impossible to decipher what's going on in these guys' heads.
Kawhi, much more to the extent of Kevin Durant.
What do you mean?
We have no idea what Kawhi thinks at any moment in time. Like,
yeah.
We say it all the time. We think he's thinking about spilled milk like 90% of the time.
The machinations of his mind are an enigma.
Exactly. I'm not here. I'm not going to tell you he's going to stay in Toronto or go anywhere, because no one knows what the fuck he's thinking ever. I don't. That's just who he is. Like,
because we were always like,
he's just a dude trying to be a guy, and he just likes to play fucking basketball.
Because no one likes to like. No one is doubting how talented he was. I never doubted how talented he was. Like, I think in San Antonio they were still a guy away. Or just like getting the right matchup in the playoffs or anything like that.
Just having them play.
The chips, like they just needed the chips to fall their way essentially, and it just never did. And he kind of got fed up and left. And I still think San Antonio at that point, if the Raptors can beat the Warriors in this series, I think it's very much palpable to believe that it's possible that the Spurs could beat the Warriors in a series as well if they had Kawhi Leonard.
Yeah, it really feels like it. Kawhi Leonard is such a big difference maker. Like his talent, like he's making an argument for being the best player in the world in this series right now.
Of course, yeah.
Defensive, the way he affects the game defensive and offensively it's fun to watch. It's exciting, even though he himself as a person is not very exciting. Watching him on the basketball court is just unbelievable. And again, he may stay in Toronto. You would think though, like looking into it, like what do you make of this team? The emergence of Pascal Siakam has been really big for this team as a motivation for him to stay, because if Siakam isn't as good as he is, what reason is there for Kawhi Leonard to stay? Because this guy has made such a big impact, and people like to make it seem like him and Siakam are like Scottie Pippen and Michael Jordan, kind of this tandem duo, this like big athletic duo, and that would be a reason for Kawhi to stay. Because if he's not, then you just have Kyle Lowry, who's getting older, and really all these like Ibaka's not getting younger, you know.
And Kyle Lowry's deal is not groovy.
Exactly. So that would be a reason for him to leave. Siakam's a reason for him to stay. You might think that he would want to place himself in a situation where he could carry another team to a finals for the next 4 years with a better outlook, like the Clippers or something like that. So it's hard to say what he's thinking. If they win, it's hard for him to leave because he just won a championship there, and obviously the front office is competent enough to make championship teams. But again, it's hard to commentate on Kawhi versus Kevin Durant, who is obviously very vocal to everybody. He gets annoyed. You hear all these reports, you know, it's this big story, and there's the big report that there's a 95% chance that Kevin Durant leaving. There aren't reports like that for Kawhi versus Kevin Durant, who you almost think that he's packing his bags right now. So that's what I think about.
So when it comes to Kawhi, I think we also have to consider like the nature of his trade request, like in the first place from San Antonio. Like he wanted to go to a bigger market. That was the thing that controlled the narrative for a little while. He wanted to be in a market, like he was kind of like, it was less about not being satisfied in Toronto or in San Antonio, and it was more about just like, hey, I feel like I could just be doing more for myself personally and in somewhere else, in a place like in just simply a bigger market. So that's where a lot of the LA talk came in. It's where a lot of the New York talk came in, and I think Kawhi is the kind of guy where it's like, if he says something publicly, or if something is said about him publicly and that like that has credence to it, I think he can. I think he's not the kind of guy. I think his I can never remember this word. Prone to impulse, and
impulsive.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it would be worth something if he won if and when he wins this series with Toronto and gets his second ring and a second Finals MVP. But he also did that in San Antonio and left a few years later. So
yeah,
I
it's hard to say.
I don't think winning this series is going to be the end all be all for him staying in Toronto.
No, if they win the series, it's not 100% that he's going to be in Toronto. He still might only be interested in playing in a big market to better market himself.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
He's not going to get in Toronto, obviously. Toronto's just not as big of a market as LA or New York.
I think whether or not he stays, it has nothing. I don't think it has anything to do with this series, though.
Right. And I don't think Toronto is going to hold him against it in any case.
If I'm Toronto and we win this series, if Kawhi gets his ring and dips, see you later, dude.
Yeah, dude. Have a good one. I hope. Wish
you
the
thanks.
best of luck. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
That's all.
That's it.
He came in here. He had the greatest season any single player in a Toronto jersey ever did, I think, just as far as just individual performance in the games that he played in, especially just in the playoffs. He's been an absolute machine in the playoffs, and it's just wherever he wants to go. I don't think he kind of just forgot about that. I think he still appreciates, as much as people were like posting pictures of like murals in the streets of Toronto being like, how could Kawhi leave this? And I'm like,
you're not get a mural anywhere.
You don't think he had fucking murals in San Antonio, dude? Like,
or he would have one in LA.
He was
or
the only.
He was
the only person. That's what I told you that. Like when Frank Ntilikina got drafted, they put him on the side of a skyscraper, dude.
Yeah, exactly.
And he stinks, man. Like
stinks.
So like, yeah, I don't think that like sentimental stuff is gonna sway Kawhi one way or another.
This guy doesn't. Sentiment doesn't mean anything.
And even to a thing like to a T, like basketball related stuff, team culture, stuff like that, systems. I don't even think that sways Kawhi because he left Greg Popovich, so he's going to go and do whatever he wants. I think there's like a good chance that he still leaves regardless, even if they win.
It feels like it. Also, so when you said basketball, really weird about
ball.
I'm gonna listen back. You said it very strangely, and it really got me off my rocker.
And then when you look at Durant, the more I look at this, the more I think it's over. Like I think he's gone.
I thought he was gonna be back for this game. There's clearly a difference between what he thinks and what the team wants him to do right now, which just doesn't help the relationship between.
I'm getting heavy Hulk Hogan versus Jeff Jarrett Bash at the Beach vibes. He's Kevin Durant is Jeff Jarrett. The Raptors are Hulk Hogan. Kevin Durant's just laying down for Hulk Hogan to pin him, and I think he knows. Like I think if you're not coming back for this series, then if Kevin Durant does not come back for this game 4. The must win of all must wins, the biggest game of his career as a Golden State Warrior, I think it's over. I think
it's hard for me to say that he doesn't come back for this big game, and then to say the next that he's going to come up big, like, or going to start playing in Toronto an elimination game. It just doesn't seem right.
And like
it doesn't seem like he wants to play in this series.
I don't want to say that.
It's hard to say. It's hard to say.
I don't want to say that, but I don't want to like try and like fuck you distracting me over there.
Come
with
on,
your mic
keep
stand.
it going. I'm working through some technical difficulties.
My like I don't want to assume that he's like not hurt. Like the energy.
I don't think that. I think he is definitely hurt.
The injury must be like. I would give credence to the idea that the injury is more serious than anyone anticipated,
or more serious than he believes that the Warrior or the team staff believes as well.
Or maybe he just doesn't feel comfortable, and despite the Warriors wanting him to play, and I guess it's we're venturing into specation now,
right? Exactly, and I don't like speculation.
I have a very vested interest in Kevin Durant leaving. You know that,
right?
And like there's Kevin Durant as opposite of Kawhi Leonard, a very very sentimental guy.
Right. Good Lord.
A guy who cares very much about like opinions and the narrative overall and like just the situation that he's in and what other people think about him. So when you look at like this kind of harkens back to this huge confrontation that he had with Draymond earlier in the season.
Yeah.
Draymond telling him that the Warriors didn't need him, that he can leave. Everyone knows that he's leaving, and that he should just like And I don't think that just goes away for a guy like Kevin Durant, a guy that like very much is acutely aware of like what people are saying about him, what people think about him. And so I think for him it's more of a, you can analyze it more of from a sentimental standpoint. So I think those narratives are still very much at play in this situation. I think like people are still very much like there's a narrative going on, like, whether or not the Warriors need Durant to win this series. That's still being heavily debated right now. Right now, it's not looking too hot for the Warriors because I think that if they had Durant for any of these games, I think we'd be getting ready to pack it up right now.
I don't think Kevin Durant has found a team where he feels like he truly belongs yet. I don't think he felt like he belonged in OKC because I felt like they kind of
grew into something that he did not anticipate,
right.
And I don't think he ultimately didn't feel comfortable with just because like the way Westbrook developed and the way he developed, and those things were just always kind of at odds.
Yeah, exactly. And then he went to the Warriors thinking that he would belong there, but then obviously
it always just belonged to Steph. Yeah,
it belonged to Steph, and then people were criticizing him so much, and he thought that the criticism would
People
go
are criticizing
away.
him now. People are saying that he's quitting on the team.
It's gotten worse. Obviously.
Fantastic way to keep him in the
worse.
city if you want him to resign. Just accuse him of quitting.
Yeah, so he's going to go to look somewhere where he can create his own future, which obviously is New York because there is no team there.
That team is ripe for him to mold completely however he wants it to.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no system. There's no set system in place.
Definitely not.
There's no star player to build around. There's no star player existent there.
It's just funny that
saying
that about like a huge franchise. There's no system. There's no star players.
There's no backbone. There's no culture. No, just kidding.
No. It's just it's barren for him to do whatever he wants with.
I think that's partially by design, though. I think that Perry and Mills and Fizdale, they kind of went into the season thinking like, let's try and like see what we can I think it was about evaluating the talent that they had, and and putting up against what they had planned for the future, seeing if they had that could potentially fit or could be useful to them in the future. Trading for a guy like DeAndre Jordan, who's friends with Kevin Durant, and getting all these guys that Kevin Durant admires on their team, and just associated with the organization in some way, and obviously trading a guy who wasn't ultimately down with the vision, because that was one of the things that was like swept under the rug with the Porzingis trade, was that like he wasn't really all that adoptive of the idea of playing with Kevin Durant, and obviously all the shit that came with it, and the fact that he like was going to sign the qualifying offer and all this other shit. But like, as far as Kevin Durant's free agency goes, like when you evaluate his options, I do think just like I think it's done in Golden State. Like as far as just like those are the two most viable options, I think the two most talked about options, as far as just like, what has been like dominating the conversation regarding Kevin Durant's free agency, it's been the Warriors, and I think it's been the Knicks. I think it's fair to say that.
Right.
And the more I watch the Warriors and the more I look at the situation, the less likely I think it is that Kevin Durant stays.
It helps the Warriors that they lose this series, but with all the other shit that's been going on, it just doesn't seem likely that he comes back.
Because like there was a point where I thought if the Warriors lost this series, it would open the door back up for Kevin Durant to re-sign,
right, and
just be like, oh, let's run it back. But I think this looks just like, it just kind of looks like this whole situation. The Warriors, it feels like it's something that's coming to an end. It feels like we're writing the end of the chapter here.
Which is crazy to think about,
because like contracts are just getting in the way, because where's DeMarcus?
Draymond's going to be up soon.
The DeMarcus Cousins experiment did not go well for DeMarcus Cousins, and ultimately it's not going to end up going well for the Warriors, because they signed him thinking they would get an all-star center, and he hasn't played like an all-star center when they've needed him to. And Klay Thompson obviously is going to warrant a fat fucking deal as well. So it's like this just seems like it's not something that's going to result in Kevin Durant like re-upping and spending perhaps like the rest of his prime in this place. I think he wants to move on, and I think he wants to go somewhere where it can be all about him.
Right, and that's what you're gonna get offered in New York. So it's very interesting. We'll pause it.
I'm gonna pause it.
I'm gonna pause it.
Good.
Where is it going with this? Let's see. And something else I think is kind of like a side story to maybe all of this is like how the Rockets are, because
it's just we're just gonna slander the Rockets out of nowhere. They've been all sitting at home for like weeks.
Going to the series, it looked like if you have the four guys for the Warriors, that they are guaranteed to win this series almost. That's what you would think, but they lost 2 games, and they lost both home games as well. Or they lost 3 games, they lost both home games at home. You got to think like that's how far behind the Rockets were not as close as we thought they were as a team.
I just like, I don't know, man. Like, sometimes when it works, it works, and when it doesn't, it's a flaming pile of shit. Like, I think that's how you work, like how you encapsulate the Rockets. They're zero, they're all or nothing, literally.
Because the idea was that if you didn't have a super ultra mega team, that you can't beat the Warriors. But the Raptors are surely not a super mega ultimate like team.
They're a team that's like committed. Like, they have a scheme and an idea.
They have a superstar player and great players around
like
him.
They have a scheme and an idea that they've committed to, and it's like, this is how we are going to do things, and we are not going to do them any other way. We're not gonna compromise on it. We're gonna add stuff that helps us with the fundamentals. Obviously, you get PJ Tucker to play defense because somebody has to, but it's like, as far like anywhere else, like if they're lacking in anything else, it's like it's not gonna be there. Like, right. they just ignore it,
Yeah, that's just something I thought about. I don't really have anything else. I mean, that's kind of been all the big storylines going into the finals. It's been a crazy finals, not certainly one that you would thought it would be like.
Hasn't gone the way
going into the playoffs. I obviously thought that the Warriors would be able to sweep whoever they are in the finals, but you can't predict a Kevin Durant injury, and you also can't predict a Klay Thompson injury.
You know what's I think is the shittiest thing about this series, because obviously, like, everyone expect going into the season, the playoffs, the conference finals, and the finals, everyone thinks like, oh, I think it's going to ultimately end. People will get their theatrics in. Everyone's like, we're going to have a small like spark of hope, but it's ultimately going to end with the Warriors winning. And I think like to a degree, I have been kind of like denying it in the past, where I think like, the Warriors being this dominant is bad for the league and it like diminishes interest in the league. I haven't been an adopter of that philosophy, but I kind of saw it like as throughout the regular season. I wasn't as me personally, I wasn't as interested in the regular season this year. And as the playoffs went on, I was like, a lot of the stuff I found it hard to be compelling. And then now we have a legitimately interesting series, and the ratings are going to be in the fucking toilet because of it, because the Nielsen ratings don't account for like all of the people, like every Canadian on the planet who's watching in Toronto.
Right.
And none of that's going to account for the American ratings, and it's going to reflect poorly on what I think has been a very surprising end to this NBA season.
Yeah, we'll never really know the ratings of this one, but it has been a good finals, much better than the past 2 years.
To his credit, because I think your efficacy for the NBA postseason was at an all-time low heading into this, because we all thought it was a foregone conclusion.
It was.
It sure seemed like it, yeah.
Well, going into the finals, I'm saying, like, I don't know what the actual ratings are for the finals, but and also the TV ratings for the Raptors are always getting messed up, but I'm talking about every other series wasn't all-time low. Like, that's just a fact. Because everyone did think that it was going to be a thing. So I don't know if we'll ever get some sort of true reflection of this NBA Finals, but the finals. Okay, well, I will say this: if we're going to have a brief discussion about the playoffs as a whole, the first rounds don't need to be 7 games. I think we can kind of see that now. The first round of the playoffs,
we kind of all universally agree on it. We can shorten it to 5 games.
Yes, it was very boring. There were so many like blowouts. Once you get into the second round and beyond, it got very good. But let's make the first round 5 games. It makes it a little more exciting, because you kind of have the chance if you're a smaller team, because you don't have to take it 7 games. So that makes it a little more exciting. And if the series is wrapping up, then it just wraps up quicker.
The playoffs are just so fucking long.
They're very long, yeah. So it's exhausting once you get to the finals almost. Luckily, the finals are interesting, but if they weren't interesting, it would be very hard to watch, because people.
That's what I'm saying. So like the past couple of years, where like we knew like Cleveland essentially had no chance of beating the Warriors.
And you also knew that they were going to make the finals as well.
Exactly. So it's like it was hard to like watch the rest of those playoffs. I obviously, me personally, was going to watch it anyway, because I'm like, I always love to watch LeBron.
Right. We're both going to watch it, obviously.
I always like to watch LeBron dominate.
We're not talking about us like hardcore fans. We're talking about casual people who would go to a bar and watch
people who just watch like the national games and shit
exactly.
like that. Yeah.
So. I don't want to go too far into like the everyday playoffs, so we'll kind of wrap it up here. Any final comments for the podcast?
Congratulations to the Toronto Raptors. Hopefully, I'm not cursing them, but
no, it's not over. It's never over till it's over, obviously. But in any case, they've been playing amazing basketball, and obviously, we'll be watching.
Kawhi Leonard's fucking incredible, and I think it's incredible that the 2 best players from each of these teams are going to be Knicks next year. It's awesome.
It's either the Knicks will have the greatest offseason of all time, or the most depressing, and you'll never come.
You'll never hear from me again if we don't sign anyone.
Yeah, go Danny Phantom on him. So, I am a Grizzlies fan, so we obviously have John Morant and Jaren Jackson, so we'll be in the finals next year. I'm not too worried about it. So that's it for today's podcast. Thanks for listening, guys. Let us know what you guys think in the comments down below, and also subscribe to our Geek Culture, our other podcast, where we'll be playing Pokemon. By the time this podcast is out, Pokemon will also be up, so go watch it. It's very fun.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.
Thanks.